Welcome, gentle soul, to another quiet passage of stillness. I am grateful that you are here. Tonight, you are invited to enter a space of ancient calm, where the wisdom of Zen Buddhism softly guides your mind and body toward a deeper sense of peace than you may have felt before. If you wish, you may notice the hour of the night and the place where you are listening. As we continue, I will share a rare collection of Buddhist insights, woven into timeless Zen stories, created to soothe the restless mind and ease the tired heart. These stories carry echoes of teachings preserved by generations of Buddhist masters for thousands of years. Within them lie subtle understandings about releasing the invisible weights that disturb your sleep, loosening the knots of tension within your chest, and discovering the quiet harmony that exists beneath every struggle. These are not ordinary tales meant to fill the silence. They are carefully chosen reflections from awakened teachers who explored the hidden pathways of emotional freedom and inner healing. The Buddha once reminded his disciples that true peace arises from within and cannot be found outside oneself. Over the coming hours, you will slowly uncover how these gentle truths can guide you toward the most nourishing rest of your life. As we move through these teachings together, something subtle may begin to shift within you. The heaviness of the day may start to soften. The stream of thoughts may gradually slow, like a river settling after a storm. Your breath may deepen naturally, as ancient wisdom quietly works within you, carrying you toward a peace that restores not only the body, but the whole of your being. So allow yourself to rest fully now. Let yourself be supported by whatever holds you in this moment. Take one slow, conscious breath with me. And as you release it, know that you are about to receive some of the Buddha's most gentle teachings. Wisdom that has waited patiently to guide you home to a quiet place within. Let us begin with a story about burdens and release. High among the sacred slopes of Mount Wutai lived a solitary hermit who devoted his days to tending a small garden of medicinal herbs. His life followed the rhythm of sunrise and sunset, the coming of rain, and the slow, silent growth of his plants. He spoke little, yet his very presence felt like a lesson. One hot summer morning, a young monk climbed the mountain path in search of him. The monk felt weighed down by study, duty, and the pressure to progress spiritually. The monastery below had become overwhelming, filled with endless tasks, complex debates, and the constant urge to improve. With heavy steps and a restless mind, he reached the hermit's garden. There he saw the hermit gently touching a small herb, shaking a single leaf. Morning dew caught the sunlight, scattering tiny sparks of light in the air. "Venerable one," the monk asked softly, his voice tired, "how do you live here in such simplicity? And how can one carry the immense weight of the world's suffering and one's own imperfections?" The hermit paused and lifted the leaf he had just touched. On its surface, a single drop of dew trembled before falling to the earth. "Before I shook it," the hermit said quietly, "this leaf carried the full weight of that drop. It was not a stone, nor a mountain. Yet for a fragile leaf, even one drop can feel overwhelming, enough to bend its stem if it clings too tightly." He looked again at the leaf, now empty except for faint traces of moisture. Now it carries nothing. The way to ease a burden is not to become stronger, nor to carry more. It is to learn how to let the burden fall, moment by moment, like morning dew. The monk gazed at the tiny leaf and felt something shift within his shoulders. A subtle release, as though unseen weights were loosening. He began to understand that the heaviness was not in the world itself, but in the mind's habit of clinging to what it cannot control. Buddhist wisdom reminds us that we lose only what we cling to. This teaching reveals the heart of human suffering. We exhaust ourselves not because life is difficult, but because we refuse to let experiences flow through us like water through open hands. Why do we hold so tightly to our burdens? Zen teaching points to a deep belief that we must carry everything alone. We gather responsibilities, worries, regrets, and expectations like a traveler filling an already heavy bag. Each added weight seems necessary, urgent, impossible to release. Consider your own life for a moment. How many invisible burdens are you carrying that serve no real purpose? A conversation from days ago that you replay again and again. A future event that keeps your mind awake. Old mistakes that follow you like shadows. These are dewdrops we refuse to release, holding them so tightly that they become heavier than mountains. The hermit's lesson reveals a quiet truth about letting go. It is not dramatic or forceful. It is a gentle allowing. Just as dew naturally disappears with the rising sun, our burdens can dissolve when we stop feeding them with resistance and attention. Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki once said that each person is already complete, and yet always open to growth. This wisdom shows us that we do not need to become stronger to carry more. We need to become wiser about which burdens truly belong to us. In meditation, we learn to observe thoughts and emotions without claiming them as our identity. Anxiety may appear, but instead of saying, "I am anxious," we notice that anxiety is present. This small shift creates space between who we are and what passes through us. The dewdrop teaches impermanence. Nothing lasts forever, not even our deepest worries or sorrows. When we understand this, we can hold life more lightly, knowing that everything changes in its own time. The Buddha warned that nothing harms us more than unguarded thoughts. Our suffering multiplies not because of circumstances, but because of how we relate to them. When we learn the art of mental release, we discover a quiet lightness that has always been available. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, notice which dewdrops you may be carrying. Can you gently shake the leaf of awareness and allow unnecessary burdens to fall away? Perhaps it is time to release what was never yours to hold. In letting go, we do not find emptiness, but spaciousness. And in that spaciousness, life's true gifts can finally be received. Now, let us turn to another story, one that reveals the wisdom hidden within patience. In a quiet monastery lived a young monk named Dawn, whose daily practice puzzled everyone around him. Each morning at dawn, he walked slowly to his master's chamber and bowed deeply. Each morning, the master looked at him, studied his face, and gently waved him away with the same words, "Not today." This ritual continued for 3 years. Other monks began to laugh at Dawn behind his back. "Why do you keep asking when you know the answer?" they whispered. "You are wasting your time. The master clearly has no intention of teaching you." Dawn simply smiled. "I am not collecting answers," he replied softly. "I am collecting refusals." His words only deepened their confusion. Some thought he had lost his mind. Others believed he was stubborn beyond reason. Yet Dawn continued, day after day, approaching his master with the same bow, receiving the same refusal, and walking away in quiet contentment. As seasons turned and years passed, something subtle changed in him. His eagerness softened into calm readiness. His anticipation faded into presence. He no longer approached his master with burning questions. but with an empty mind, open and still. On the morning of the 1000th refusal, something unexpected happened. Before Dawn could speak, the master said, "Today, I will answer your question." Dawn bowed deeply and said with sincerity, "Thank you, Master, but I no longer have a question." The master laughed with pure joy, a laughter so light that even the animals paused to listen. "Then you have understood what I was teaching you," he said. "What is that, Master?" Dawn asked. "The art of holding space for an answer without demanding it. The art of being ready without grasping readiness. Your 1000 refusals created emptiness within you. And in that emptiness, wisdom could enter naturally, like water finding a well. The Buddha taught that the mind shapes everything we become. This story reveals how our relationship with waiting and openness determines our capacity for true understanding. Why do we struggle with patience? Modern life trains us to expect immediate results. We seek instant solutions, rapid progress, and quick answers. But wisdom cannot be forced. It arrives only when the conditions are ready. Dawn's practice shows the difference between passive waiting and active preparation. He did not simply endure rejection. He used each refusal to deepen humility, patience, and openness. With every "not today," another layer of expectation fell away. How often do we approach learning with hidden demands? We read spiritual books hoping for one perfect insight. We meditate expecting dramatic breakthroughs. We seek teachers hoping they will hand us ready-made wisdom. This turns us into consumers of spirituality rather than true students. The years of refusal taught Dawn something deeper than any direct teaching could. He learned to find meaning in the process itself, not in the result. He discovered that the quality of seeking matters more than the object sought. Zen wisdom reminds us that a beginner's mind holds endless possibilities, while an expert's mind becomes narrow. Dawn's refusals emptied him of assumptions and certainty, returning him to openness. This emptiness was not absence, but spaciousness. Like a bowl that can be filled only when empty, the mind can receive wisdom only when it releases expectations. The Master's final lesson revealed a paradox. When we stop grasping, what we seek often appears. Dawn received his answer only when he no longer needed it. The Buddha taught that truth cannot remain hidden forever. It reveals itself in its own time. Our task is not to force it, but to remain aware enough to recognize it when it appears. Tonight, as you reflect on the questions that trouble your heart, can you hold them gently rather than tightly? Perhaps the answers are already forming in the quiet space of not knowing. In patient openness, wisdom arises naturally. And so, we continue our journey, turning now toward a story about recognizing wisdom where we least expect it. In the quiet halls of Master Yunmen's monastery, there rested an old meditation cushion that had carried the weight of countless practitioners for more than 2 centuries. Its cloth had faded from deep crimson into soft, uneven earth tones. Inside, the buckwheat filling had settled into gentle hollows and rises, shaped by time and presence. So many repairs had been made that layers of patches formed a mosaic of years and memories. Yet, no matter how often visitors suggested replacing it, the master always declined. One autumn afternoon, a prosperous merchant arrived at the monastery with the intention of offering a generous donation. Recently introduced to meditation, he felt grateful for the calm it had brought to his busy and pressured life. As he walked through the meditation hall, his gaze stopped on the worn cushion, and his expression tightened with surprise. "Master Yun Men," he said carefully, trying not to sound disrespectful, "surely you deserve something finer than this. Please allow me to offer a new cushion for your practice. Silk fabric, perfectly shaped, filled with the finest materials. It would be an honor to contribute something worthy of your discipline." Master Yun Men gently lowered himself onto the old cushion. His body settled into it as though it had been waiting for him. With a soft smile, he said, "This cushion has already awakened. It would be unkind to replace it now, just as it has reached such deep understanding." The merchant laughed awkwardly. "Master, surely you jest. A cushion cannot awaken. It is only an object." "Is it?" the master replied quietly. "Let us listen." He closed his eyes for a moment, as if hearing something beyond words. Then he nodded slowly. "This cushion has supported thousands of hours of sitting. It has absorbed innumerable breaths, received tears of joy and sorrow, and never once protested the weight placed upon it. It has remained steady through doubt and clarity alike." The master stood and bowed toward the cushion with sincere respect. "More than that," he continued, "it has learned to be fully present for whoever sits upon it. Anxious students, peaceful teachers, wandering visitors. It welcomes them all with the same quiet support. If this is not awakening, what else could it be?" The merchant looked again, and his vision changed. He no longer saw a shabby object, but a silent teacher. The worn fabric seemed to hold the stories of countless seekers. The patches spoke of care, continuity, and devotion beyond appearance. "But how can something without life teach us?" he asked gently. "By embodying the very qualities we seek," the master replied. "Patience that does not waver, presence that does not fade, acceptance that does not judge." Without speaking a word, this cushion expresses the deepest teachings. Buddhist wisdom tells us that countless lamps can be lit from a single flame without diminishing its light. In the same way, wisdom can appear in any form that reflects stillness, service, and compassion. Why do we overlook the teachers that surround us each day? Our minds are trained to search for wisdom only in grand forms. Famous teachers, distant retreats, rare experiences. We chase the extraordinary and miss the quiet guidance hidden in ordinary things. The awakened cushion symbolizes all the humble teachers we habitually ignore. The tree outside your window that stands firm through every season. The cup that holds your morning tea. The shoes that carry you across long roads without complaint. When we approach life with gentle attention, every object can become a teacher. The cushion's awakening did not come through dramatic change. It came through consistent availability. Year after year, it offered support without seeking recognition or reward. This is what Zen calls Buddha nature. The quiet awareness that exists in all things. When we recognize this quality in a simple cushion, we begin to see it everywhere. In the chair that supports your work. In the earth that nourishes all beings. In the silence that surrounds every sound. The patches on the cushion tell a story of impermanence and beauty. In Japanese thought, this is called wabi-sabi. The grace of the worn, the imperfect, the incomplete. Each patch marks a moment when repair was chosen over replacement, wisdom over novelty. Zen Master Dogen taught that to study the way is to study the self, and to study the self is to forget the self. The cushion had forgotten itself completely. It had no identity beyond presence, no purpose beyond service. It embodied the egoless awareness that many seek for years in meditation. The merchant's impulse to replace the cushion reflected a familiar habit. We often equate value with appearance. We assume that new is better, costly is superior, impressive is meaningful. Yet, the master's lesson revealed how time, use, and quiet devotion cultivate a deeper form of wisdom. The Buddha once said that a single word that brings peace is greater than thousands of empty phrases. The cushion spoke no words at all. Yet its silent teaching conveyed more truth than countless explanations. Tonight, as you look around your space, notice the humble objects that quietly support your life. Perhaps it is time to bow inwardly to those silent teachers that have never asked for recognition. When we release our assumptions about what wisdom should look like, we begin to see that it is everywhere, waiting patiently to be noticed. And so, our journey continues with another story, one that reveals the nature of the path itself. High in the mist-covered mountains lived a hermit known as the Cloud Gatherer. He rarely descended to the villages below and was not known for grand speeches or dramatic revelations. Instead, he devoted his days to collecting wild herbs and observing the shifting patterns of the sky. He ground roots into medicine. He watched clouds form and dissolve. He listened to the wind carrying whispers from distant peaks. Many pilgrims attempted the difficult ascent to seek his guidance. The trail was faint, sometimes disappearing altogether, then reappearing like a thought in meditation. Loose stones, sudden storms, and steep cliffs tested their resolve. Yet those who reached the summit often found the hermit engaged in the simplest of tasks. One windy afternoon, a determined scholar arrived at the hermit's shelter after 3 days of climbing. His robes were torn by thorns, his feet blistered by rock and cold. But his eyes burned with ambition. "Master," he said breathlessly, leaning against an old pine tree, "I have followed this path for days, sleeping on the ground and eating only what I carried. I seek the way to awakening. Where does it lead? What must I do to find the true path?" The Cloud Gatherer slowly lifted his gaze from a wooden bowl where he was sifting tea leaves. Mist swirled around them, forming shapes that appeared and vanished in the air. He pointed gently toward the winding trail the scholar had just climbed. "It leads exactly from where you believed you began," he said softly, "and exactly to where you now stand." The scholar frowned, disappointed. "But that is only the physical path," he insisted. "I mean the real journey. Surely there must be a map, a method, a hidden teaching that leads to awakening." The hermit smiled, his expression as open as the sky. "The cloud leaves no mark in the sky," he said, "yet it transforms the landscape below. The dewdrop leaves no trace on the leaf once it falls, yet it nourishes the roots of the plant." He paused, watching a cloud drift between them, briefly obscuring the distant peaks. "The true path is not the one your feet follow, but the one that disappears behind you, leaving only the present moment fully lived. Each step erases itself. Each breath begins anew. Each moment contains the whole teaching." The scholar stood silently in the mist. His carefully planned journey suddenly felt fragile and unreal. He had climbed the mountain seeking a destination, only to realize that the seeking itself was dissolving as he walked. As the Buddha taught, happiness is not something we reach, it is the way itself. Why do we search for the path instead of recognizing that we are already on it? The mind invents stages, levels, and destinations. These ideas give us direction, but they also create the illusion that fulfillment exists somewhere else, in some future moment. The cloud gatherer's wisdom reveals the paradox of the pathless path. The purpose of the journey is to discover that there was never anywhere to go. Not because the journey is meaningless, but because seeker and destination are not separate. Consider your own experience. You move from one moment to the next, yet you never arrive air except here. You breathe from one breath to another, yet you never breathe anywhere except now. The spiritual path follows the same rhythm. It is a journey without distance, toward a truth that was never a. The cloud that leaves no trace teaches us the nature of mindful living. Each moment arises, is fully felt, and fades away. When we stop trying to preserve experiences or accumulate spiritual achievements, we discover the freedom of traveling lightly. True practice does not produce trophies we can display. It quietly transforms how we meet life. Compassion does not build monuments, yet it softens the heart. Meditation does not create visible achievements, yet it changes the way we see everything. The scholar's desire for maps and secret teachings reflects our need for certainty. But the hermit's wisdom suggests that certainty often blocks awakening, because it keeps us focused on the future rather than the present. The Buddha advised us not to accept teachings blindly, but to test them through direct experience. The path that disappears behind us reminds us that no past insight can replace present awareness. Each moment asks us to begin again, with openness and humility. Tonight, as you rest between waking and sleep, can you feel that you are already standing where you once hoped to arrive? Perhaps the path you sought is simply the awareness of this breath, this heartbeat, this quiet moment of being. The spiritual path is not a journey elsewhere. It is the art of being fully here. And as we continue our exploration of Zen wisdom, we arrive at another story, one that reveals the unexpected fruits of awakening. In a mountain monastery surrounded by ancient pines lived a young monk named Kassen. He devoted himself to practice with rare intensity. For years, he sat in silence, studied the scriptures with precision, and performed every duty with careful attention. During a week of silent retreat, something remarkable occurred. On the fifth morning, as pale light filtered through the hall, Kassen experienced a profound opening. The boundaries he believed separated himself from the world dissolved. The searching that had driven him for so long revealed itself as unnecessary. What he had sought had never been hidden. Yet instead of the calm serenity others expected, Kassen began to laugh. Not a brief laugh, not a polite smile, but a deep, gentle laughter that flowed like a quiet spring. At first, the monks thought it was simply a release of long-held tension. But hours passed, then days, and Kassen continued to laugh softly, his quiet joy accompanying everything he did. He laughed while chanting prayers for the departed. He laughed while sweeping the stone courtyards of the temple. He laughed while carrying water from the well. Sometimes, even in sleep, a faint sound of laughter flowed from his breath, as though his dreams were filled with the same quiet joy. At first, the other monks tried to be patient. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, Kassen's gentle laughter began to trouble them. "This is inappropriate," they complained to the abbot during their weekly gathering. "How can we preserve the atmosphere of seriousness and discipline when he is always smiling and laughing? People come here seeking stillness and solemnity, not amusement." The abbot observed Kassen in silence before responding. Despite his unusual state, the young monk performed every duty with unwavering care. His meditation was steady and deep. His service to the community was precise and attentive. Only his quiet laughter remained, flowing through his actions like a soft undercurrent. One evening, after meditation, the abbot approached him directly. "My son," he asked with sincere curiosity, "why do you laugh so often? What is it that you find so delightful in our serious practice?" Kasan tried to speak calmly, yet even his words were touched by waves of laughter. "Master," he said softly, his eyes bright with gentle wonder, "I spent 12 years in this hall searching for my true nature. I studied endless teachings, bowed countless times, and pushed myself with doubt and ambition." He paused as another quiet laugh rose from his chest. "And then I saw something very simple. Buddha nature had never been hidden from me, not for a single moment. It was closer than my breath, more intimate than my thoughts. I was like someone desperately searching for glasses that were already on his face." His laughter grew warmer. "The mystery is too beautiful to contain. We exhaust ourselves looking for what we already are, seeking what was never lost, trying to become what we have always been. How could anyone not laugh at such gentle absurdity?" The abbot felt his stern expression soften. Then it cracked into a smile, and finally dissolved into laughter. Soon the entire community was laughing, not at anything in particular, but at the strange and tender journey of the human search that leads us in a perfect circle back to ourselves. The Buddha once spoke of the freedom that arises when fear dissolves and dependence falls away. This wisdom reveals the deep relief that comes from recognizing our inherent completeness. Why does awakening sometimes appear as joy rather than silence? When we realize our true nature, the discovery can be so surprising, so different from our assumptions, that laughter becomes the only natural response. Kasan's laughter expressed the recognition of what Zen calls the original face, the self that existed before we learned to believe we were lacking. This was not an idea, but a direct seeing. Like realizing that what you feared was a snake was only a rope lying in the grass. Consider how many years people spend trying to improve themselves. Meditation to calm the mind, practice to refine the body, study to sharpen the intellect, service to soften the heart. All of these have value. Yet the final discovery is that the seeker and the sought were never separate. The quiet joke Kasan perceived was that we are already what we strive to become. The peace we seek is the awareness that observes both restlessness and calm. The love we cultivate is the heart that can both open and close. The wisdom we pursue is the consciousness that witnesses both knowing and not knowing. This does not make practice meaningless. Just as searching for glasses leads us to realize they were already there, the path leads us to the recognition that there was nowhere else to go. Every step contributes to the moment of seeing. A Zen teacher once said that the ordinary mind itself is the way. Awakening is not a rare state achieved by extraordinary people, but the recognition of what is already present. Kasan's laughter also revealed the relief of letting go of the endless project of self-improvement. When we recognize our wholeness, we can finally rest from the exhausting effort to fix ourselves. This does not lead to indifference, but to a more natural and compassionate engagement with life. The Buddha invited us to look within and recognize our own nature. Not because we become Buddha through practice, but because we discover that we never stopped being Buddha, even in confusion. Tonight, as you reflect on your own search, Can you sense the gentle humor in your sincere efforts to find what was never lost? Perhaps there is comfort in realizing that you do not need to earn peace, love, or freedom. You are already the awareness in which all experiences appear and fade. In this understanding, we may find ourselves joining Kassan's quiet laughter, a laughter born not from mockery, but from wonder. And now, let us turn to another story, one that reveals the sacredness hidden within ordinary moments. Master Huang Po was known throughout ancient lands for his sharp insight and uncompromising clarity. Students traveled across mountains and rivers to receive even a single sentence from him. His reputation spread like wind through monasteries and villages. One student, after many weeks of travel, finally received permission to meet him. He had prepared carefully for this moment, memorizing refined questions about mind, truth, and awakening. His heart raced as he entered the master's simple chamber. "Venerable teacher," he said, bowing deeply, "I have endured great hardship to reach you. I seek the deepest wisdom of Zen. Please share with me the secret teaching that will free me from suffering." Huang Po looked at him with eyes both clear and tired, as if he had heard this request many times before. "I'm sorry," he said gently, "but today is my day of rest." The student froze in confusion. "A day of rest?" he whispered. "But surely awakened beings do not rest. Surely the Dharma flows without pause. How can enlightenment take a break?" Instead of answering, the master gestured for him to follow. They walked past the meditation hall and the library of scriptures, toward the humble kitchen behind the monastery. There, among clay pots and wooden utensils, Huang Po rolled up his sleeves and began washing dishes. His movements were slow and natural. He lifted each bowl with quiet attention, as if it were a sacred text. He cleaned each spoon with the same care he might give to a profound teaching. Steam rose from the warm water, catching the afternoon light. "Master," the student asked urgently, "when will you teach me about awakening? When will you share the wisdom I traveled so far to receive?" Without lifting his eyes from the water, Huang Po replied softly, "Who told you I am not teaching you now?" The student watched more closely. The master's hands moved with effortless presence. Each gesture seemed complete in itself. "There is no day off from awakening," Huang Po said quietly. "But there is also no special day for awakening. This moment, washing bowls, feeling fatigue, breathing steam, this is the deepest teaching available." He held up a simple cup, examined it in the light, and placed it gently on the rack. If you cannot find Buddha nature in dishwater and leftover rice, you will never find it in scriptures or monasteries. If this ordinary moment is not complete, no amount of practice will make any other moment complete. Here we discover that the spiritual path is not separate from daily life. It is daily life met with full presence. Why do we divide life into sacred and ordinary? We imagine that awakening happens in meditation halls, not kitchens, in rare experiences, not simple tasks. Yet awareness is the same everywhere. When we wash dishes with attention, we touch the same stillness that mystics find in silence. When we fold clothes or prepare food, we meet the same clarity that appears in meditation. The student expected secret knowledge, but Huang Po revealed that the deepest teaching is already visible. Practice does not create truth. It trains the eyes to see what has always been there. Time, presence, and action are not separate. The master did not wash dishes to move on to something more important. He washed dishes because this was what the moment offered. And this moment is the only place where awakening occurs. Tonight, as you move through ordinary tasks, perhaps preparing food, tidying your space, or settling into rest, can you bring the same gentle awareness to each action? You may discover that your own surroundings hold the same wisdom that seekers travel far to find. And so, our journey continues toward another story that reveals the nature of ultimate truth. In ancient times, there lived an emperor renowned for his devotion to the Buddhist path. Unlike rulers concerned only with power, he devoted years to study, generosity, and contemplation. His palace was filled with sacred texts and statues, and he invited many teachers to guide his understanding. When he heard of a Zen master whose insight transcended all learning, he summoned him to the palace. On the day of the meeting, the emperor prepared questions meant to display his knowledge. When the master entered, he appeared simple and unadorned, his robes worn from travel, his presence calm and direct. "Venerable teacher," the emperor said, "I have studied the teachings for many years, built temples and supported monks. Tell me, what is the highest truth of the Buddhist way?" The emperor leaned forward, expecting a profound explanation. The master looked into his eyes and answered quietly, "Vast emptiness. Not a trace of holiness." Silence filled the hall. Confused, the emperor asked, "If there is no holiness, then who are you?" "I do not know," the master replied. With those words, all concepts fell away. True wisdom begins where certainty ends. And in that open space of not knowing, the mind becomes free to see what is real. Tonight, as you rest in the quiet of this moment, perhaps you can allow yourself to not know. In that gentle openness, you may discover that nothing is missing and nothing needs to be added. And now, let us move toward another teaching, one that reveals the subtle misunderstanding behind spiritual effort. In a silent meditation hall, a young monk sits perfectly still. His posture is flawless. His breath is steady. His determination is unbreakable. Day after day, he sits with the belief that through effort alone he will become a Buddha. His master watches quietly. One afternoon, the master picks up a roof tile and begins rubbing it against a stone. The scraping sound breaks the silence. Finally, the monk opens his eyes. "Master," he asks respectfully, "what are you doing?" "I am polishing this tile until it becomes a mirror," the master replies. The monk is astonished. "But that is impossible," he says. "No matter how long you polish, a tile cannot become a mirror." The master nods gently. "Then how can you become a Buddha through sitting?" he asks. In that moment, the monk begins to understand. Awakening is not something we manufacture. It is something we recognize. And so, the quiet journey continues. Many seekers approach awakening as if it were a mechanical process. They believe that if they repeat the right actions long enough, something extraordinary will eventually appear. They imagine meditation as a tool that gradually reshapes the mind, like hands polishing a surface until it becomes bright. In this view, effort becomes a ladder. The more one climbs, the closer one believes oneself to be to a distant summit. The longer one sits, the more awakened one expects to become. Yet the Zen master's simple demonstration quietly dissolves this illusion. A tile cannot become a mirror, no matter how carefully it is polished. Its essence remains unchanged. Only its outer appearance can be altered. In the same way, our true nature cannot be produced through effort, because it has never been absent. Awakening is not something that practice creates. At most, practice clears the mist that hides what has always been here. This understanding does not diminish the value of meditation. It gently redefines its meaning. To sit is not to become someone else. To sit is to remember who we have always been, beneath layers of thought, expectation, and self-image. It is not transformation, but unveiling. Not accumulation, but recognition. The great teacher Dogen expressed this with quiet clarity. Practice and awakening are not two separate realities. We do not meditate in order to reach enlightenment someday. When we sit without chasing a destination, sitting itself becomes the natural expression of awakened presence. There is a subtle shift here. When meditation changes from something we do to something we simply are, the entire journey softens. Imagine how this understanding might reshape your relationship with practice. Instead of striving toward a future state, you begin to explore the nature of awareness in this very moment. Instead of collecting spiritual experiences, you turn your attention toward the one who experiences them all. Instead of trying to become enlightened, you quietly observe how consciousness reveals itself, breath by breath. The Buddha once said that our lives are shaped by our thoughts. When we believe awakening must be achieved, we become restless achievers. When we realize it is our natural condition, temporarily obscured, we become gentle explorers of our own awareness. This recognition does not remain confined to meditation halls. It flows naturally into ordinary life. Washing dishes is no longer preparation for awakening. It is awakening expressing itself through simple movement. Walking, working, speaking, resting, all become moments in which awareness quietly recognizes itself. The Zen master Bankei spoke of the unborn mind, a consciousness that is already awake and does not require improvement. When anger appears, anger is simply anger. When peace appears, peace is simply peace. The awareness that knows these states never becomes them and never needs to be repaired. The young monk in our story represents all who confuse effort with realization. His devotion was sincere, yet his understanding made the path heavier than it needed to be. Awakening is not earned by counting hours of sitting. It is revealed through clear seeing. This does not invite laziness. Instead, it points toward a different kind of effort. An effortless effort that arises when we stop trying to escape the present and begin to explore where we already stand. Strangely, this often deepens practice rather than weakening it. When we release the pressure to arrive somewhere else, our engagement becomes more natural, more consistent, more alive. The image of polishing tiles also reflects many spiritual methods that emphasize gradual improvement over direct recognition. Techniques can bring stability and focus, yet they become obstacles when we treat them as machines for producing enlightenment. Tonight, as you move gently toward rest, you might experiment with the difference between doing practice and being practice. Perhaps you will sense that the awareness you have been trying to cultivate is already quietly present, timeless, spacious, and waiting for nothing except your noticing. As the Buddha reminded us, peace is not found outside. The calm you search for through effort is already the nature of the awareness that searches. And now, let us turn toward another story. A story about expectations and the quiet wisdom that often arrives in unexpected forms. The monks of Chafukuji Temple received joyful news. Their new abbot was finally on his way. For many weeks, the community prepared with great care. They cleaned every corridor, polished every floor, and rehearsed the rituals of welcome. In their minds, they imagined a teacher of impressive presence, tall, dignified, radiant with authority, someone whose arrival would immediately command reverence. On the appointed day, they gathered along the road outside Hakata. Their robes were arranged neatly. Their hearts were filled with anticipation. They waited under the slow movement of the afternoon sun. Travelers passed by, merchants with heavy carts, families returning from the market, officials riding horses. Yet none resembled the majestic master they expected. As time passed, uncertainty began to rise. Had the abbot been delayed? Had he chosen another path? Had some misunderstanding occurred? As twilight softened the sky, a small, weary figure appeared in the distance. As he approached, the monks saw a travel-worn beggar priest. His robes were patched and faded. His posture was humble, almost apologetic. Nothing about him suggested greatness. Still, curiosity stirred. Perhaps this wandering monk had encountered their new teacher along the road. They called out gently, "Excuse us. Have you met a respected master named Sengai? We are waiting for him. He is to become our new abbot." The stranger paused. For a long moment, he looked at them quietly. In his eyes, there was a depth they had not noticed before. Then he spoke, softly and simply. "Yes, Sengai, that is me." Silence fell upon the monks. Their carefully constructed expectations dissolved like mist in morning light. This humble traveler, this unremarkable figure, was the teacher they had imagined in grand forms. The Buddha taught that appearances can deceive, and that a rich heart may dwell beneath simple clothing. This story reveals something profound about our relationship with truth. Why do we expect wisdom to arrive in impressive shapes? Why do we associate depth with grandeur and authority with spectacle? Our conditioning teaches us to search for brilliance in outward forms, and in doing so, we often overlook what is quietly real. The monks' preparations were sincere, yet their expectations prevented them from recognizing their teacher when he arrived. They honored an image rather than a living presence. How often does this happen in our own lives? We miss meaningful insights because they come from unexpected voices. We dismiss the wisdom of children because it lacks formality. We overlook lessons offered by ordinary people because they lack status. Sometimes, the guidance we need arrives through the simplest situations. A casual conversation, a difficult moment, a humble practice that seems too ordinary to matter. Zen speaks of beginner's mind, a state of openness free from fixed ideas. Master Sengai's appearance was not a disguise. It was an expression of genuine freedom from the need to impress. True realization often moves toward simplicity rather than display. It sheds unnecessary weight. It travels lightly. The monk's surprise revealed a misunderstanding. They believed enlightenment should look extraordinary. Yet authentic wisdom often appears quiet, modest, almost invisible. This story also reflects how we prepare for imagined futures while remaining unprepared for reality. We decorate our expectations, yet fail to recognize the gifts already arriving. What is true authority? Is it appearance, reputation, and recognition, or the silent confidence that comes from direct understanding? Sengai's gentle words carried more depth than any dramatic entrance could have achieved. He did not attempt to manage perceptions. He simply arrived as he was, allowing truth to speak for itself. Tonight, as you reflect on your own expectations, you might notice where you have been waiting for wisdom to appear in grand forms. Perhaps some of the most meaningful teachings in your life have already arrived quietly, disguised as ordinary moments. As the Buddha said, truth cannot remain hidden forever. It reveals itself not through spectacle, but through presence. And now, let us move gently into another story, one that explores identity and the mystery of consciousness itself. Long ago, there lived a sage named Zhuangzi. He lived simply, contemplating nature and the subtle patterns of existence. He was known not for grand speeches, but for his ability to see beyond appearances. One afternoon, after walking through bamboo groves and listening to water flowing among stones, he lay down beneath a flowering tree. The warmth of sunlight, the whisper of wind, and the fragrance of blossoms slowly carried him into sleep. In his dream, something remarkable happened. He was no longer a man. He had become a butterfly. His human memories vanished completely. He fluttered lightly from flower to flower, feeling the world through delicate wings and instinctive movement. There was no philosophy, no identity, no questions, only color, motion, and the simple joy of flight. He did not dream that he was a man dreaming. He was entirely a butterfly, free from the weight of human thought. Then gently he awakened. He found himself again beneath the tree, his body familiar, his mind filled with quiet wonder. And as he opened his eyes, a question arose, not loudly but softly, like a ripple in still water. Yet Zhuangzi did not brush the experience aside as a strange dream. Instead, a quiet unease arose within him, gentle yet profound, as if a question had opened that could not be closed again. He sat upright beneath the tree, his body still carrying the faint memory of wings and air. Slowly, he turned inward and listened. "Was I a man dreaming that I was a butterfly?" he asked softly. "Or am I now a butterfly dreaming that I am a man?" This was not a playful thought. It was a doorway into something deeper, a challenge to everything he believed about identity and reality. If the life of a butterfly had felt entirely real while it unfolded, how could he be certain that his current life as a human was more solid, more permanent, more true? The Buddha taught that all conditioned things are impermanent, and that awakening begins when we observe this truth with clarity. Zhuangzi's question reflects this same insight, that identity is not fixed, and that the self we cling to may be far more fluid than we imagine. Why do we assume that the state we inhabit right now is the ultimate form of reality? Zen wisdom reminds us that waking, dreaming, and sleeping are all passing states within a vast field of awareness. They arise, transform, and dissolve like waves on the surface of the sea. During the dream, the butterfly was real. After waking, the man felt equally real. But which one was the true self? Perhaps the question itself rests on an illusion. Consider your own experience. Are you the same person in dreams as you are in waking life? Are you the same when you are lost in music, absorbed in creative flow, or resting in deep meditation where the sense of I fades away? Which of these states defines who you truly are? Zen invites us to see identity not as something solid, but as a series of appearances within consciousness, like clouds drifting through the sky or ripples moving across water. The clouds are real, yet they are not separate from the sky. The waves are real, yet they are not separate from the ocean. In the same way, our many identities are real, yet they are not separate from the awareness in which they appear. Chuangzi's dream reveals something subtle about transformation. If consciousness could fully become a butterfly, what does that say about the boundaries we believe define us? How firm are the limits we place upon ourselves based on our roles, histories, and self-images? Dogen once taught that to study the self is to forget the self. The more deeply we examine who we think we are, the more our rigid definitions begin to soften and dissolve. The Buddha spoke of form and emptiness, of appearance and essence flowing together without separation. The man and the butterfly are both real, yet neither possesses a permanent, independent existence. They are momentary expressions within awareness, authentic while present, and naturally fading to make room for what comes next. Look gently at your own sense of self. How much of your identity is shaped by memory, habit, and expectation? What remains when you release the need to be any particular person? Tonight, as you drift between waking and dreaming, you might remember Chuangzi's quiet question. Whether you experience yourself as a human or a butterfly, a worker or a dreamer, the awareness that holds these experiences remains spacious and unchanged. Everything shifts, yet something deeper remains open and free, like the sky beyond passing clouds. The man dreams of being a butterfly. The butterfly dreams of being a man. But the dreaming itself, the pure capacity to experience, is vast, silent, and untouched by form. And now, let us move toward another story. A story about humility and the quiet strength that hides within apparent weakness. Long ago, there lived a monk named Butsugai, born into a family of renowned warriors. From his ancestors, he inherited not only courage, but extraordinary physical power. Though he entered the Buddhist path at a young age, he never abandoned his training in martial arts. Beneath his simple robes lived the discipline of archery, horsemanship, and the subtle knowledge of combat. Few people knew of his abilities. Within the monastery, however, his strength was legendary. The monks whispered that his fists could shatter anything, yet he himself never spoke of such things. During an age of unrest, when old orders were fading and new powers were rising, bands of ambitious warriors began to roam the cities. They were bold, arrogant, and restless, using fear to assert their presence. One afternoon, as Butsugai walked quietly through the streets of Kyoto, the sound of bamboo swords drew his attention. Curiosity led him toward a training hall, where he paused to observe through a window. The warriors noticed him. Angered by his presence, they rushed outside and surrounded the humble monk. "What brings you here?" they demanded. "Who allowed you to watch us?" Butsugai bowed deeply, his voice gentle. "I am only a wandering monk," he said. "I heard the sound of practice and paused for a moment. I meant no disrespect." The warriors smiled among themselves. They sensed an opportunity for amusement. "If you watch our training," they said, "you must know something of martial arts. Come inside and show us what you can do." Reluctantly, Butsugai followed them. Inside the hall, bamboo swords were raised against him. Yet he showed no anger, no pride, no urgency. Holding only a simple ceremonial scepter, he began to defend himself with effortless precision. One by one, the warriors attacked. One by one, their weapons were broken. Within moments, their confidence dissolved into astonishment. The noise drew the attention of their leader, a formidable warrior known throughout the region. He entered the hall carrying a spear, his presence commanding silence. "Your skill surpasses these men," he said. "Now face me." At that moment, Butsugai's expression changed. His body trembled. He fell to the ground in apparent fear. "I have heard your name," he cried. "Your reputation is known everywhere. How could a poor monk stand against you? Please spare me." The warrior's pride swelled. "Stand and fight," he commanded. When offered weapons, Butsugai refused. "As a monk, I cannot carry instruments of harm," he said softly. Instead, he lifted 2 ordinary wooden begging bowls. "These will suffice," he whispered. The warrior was enraged. He raised his spear, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Time passed in silence. At last, he launched his attack with the force of thunder. In a single fluid movement, Butsugai stepped aside, caught the spear between his bowls, and held it fast. The warrior struggled with all his strength, yet the spear would not move. After a long moment, Butsugai released it suddenly with a sharp cry. The warrior was thrown backward across the hall, his pride shattered along with his balance. When he rose, his arrogance had vanished. He bowed deeply before the monk. "Who are you truly?" he asked. "I am only a wandering monk named Butsugai," came the quiet reply. From that day forward, his name spread throughout the land. Yet Butsugai himself remained unchanged. He sought no fame, no comfort, no recognition. When offered grand temples and luxurious lives, he declined them all. He chose simplicity, contentment, and silence. Students eventually gathered around him, drawn not by his strength, but by his humility. To one young swordsman seeking guidance, Butsugai offered a single paradoxical verse, a teaching so subtle that it took years to understand. Through contemplation, the student discovered the hidden essence of the gentle art, and later became renowned in his own right. Yet Butsugai remained in his humble temple, living quietly, needing little, desiring nothing beyond what was necessary. Ancient wisdom tells us that true greatness often appears small, and true power often hides behind gentleness. Why do we equate strength with domination and weakness with insignificance? Perhaps the deepest power is not the ability to strike, but the ability to remain calm. Not the urge to conquer, but the capacity to yield. And as the night deepens, as thoughts soften and breath slows, we begin to sense a quiet truth. That beneath all appearances, true strength is silent, true wisdom is humble, and true awakening moves through the world without needing to announce itself. Many people believe that victory must humiliate others, and that true mastery must announce itself with noise and display. Yet the life of Butsugai reveals a different truth, the quiet distinction between force and power, between domination and authentic mastery. His apparent fear before his opponent was not weakness. It was clarity. By allowing the warrior's pride to expand unchecked, he created the very conditions that made transformation inevitable. His humility was not surrender, but the highest expression of intelligence shaped by awareness. The shift from iron scepter to wooden bowls carries a deeper meaning. The scepter represented authority, form, and tradition. Against ordinary fighters, it was sufficient. But when facing a true master, Butsugai reached instead for the simplest objects of his life, begging bowls, symbols of dependence and openness. In that moment, the humble became invincible. The ordinary surpassed the extraordinary. True strength emerged not from rigidity, but from flexibility. Not from aggression, but from responsiveness. not from hardness, but from quiet adaptability. Consider your own life. How often might genuine vulnerability accomplish more than displays of force? How many conflicts could soften if you allowed yourself to yield rather than resist? What might change if humility became your strategy instead of your defense? Butsugai's verse about the mosquito net points to this wisdom. The net does not fight the insect. It simply stands in the right place. Water does not argue with stone. It flows, and over time, the stone transforms. Authentic martial arts, like authentic spirituality, does not seek confrontation. It seeks harmony with the natural movement of reality. The Zen masters taught that the mind obsessed with winning is already on the path to defeat. Butsugai did not seek victory. He listened to each moment and responded without attachment. The young swordsman who declared that he had come to die at the teacher's hands expressed the true spirit of learning. To learn deeply, we must allow false confidence to fall, allow pride to dissolve, allow the illusion of invulnerability to disappear. Tonight, as you reflect on strength and weakness, can you feel the difference between power that demands recognition and power that moves quietly beneath the surface? Can you sense how humility might transform more than any attempt to prove yourself? The Buddha taught that a single word of peace is worth more than 1,000 empty declarations. Often, the gentlest response holds the greatest capacity to heal. And now, we return to the beginning of seeking, to the simple, innocent questions of childhood, where wisdom often hides in plain sight. When Master Ryoan was a small boy, long before he became known for insight and compassion, he was simply a child learning the rhythms of family life. Like many children, he sometimes struggled with rules and expectations, sometimes testing boundaries he did not yet understand. One morning he slept longer than he should have. In his household, early rising was not merely habit, but a sign of character and discipline. When his father discovered this, he reacted with the stern correction common in that era. Yet the boy did not respond with apology. Instead, he looked up with a steady gaze, not defiant, but direct, unfiltered. His father felt unsettled by that look. In a culture that valued obedience, such a gaze seemed improper. And in frustration, he spoke words that would echo far beyond the moment. "Any child who stares at his father like that," he said, "will surely become a flounder." To an adult, these words might sound symbolic. To a child, they were reality. Fear filled the boy's heart. Without speaking, he ran from the house, through fields and paths, until he reached a cliff overlooking the ocean. There he sat, waiting. As hours passed, his family searched desperately. When they finally found him at dusk, he was still seated by the edge of the sea, gazing at the waves. "Why are you here?" they asked gently. "We've been looking everywhere for you." The boy looked up, puzzled and sincere. "Why haven't I turned into a flounder yet?" In Zen teaching, the beginner's mind contains infinite possibilities, while the expert mind sees only a few. Within the boy's simple question lived a depth that adults often overlook. His literal faith led him directly into the mystery of identity and transformation. He was not playing with ideas. He was confronting the nature of change itself. While adults hide behind concepts, the child faced the unknown directly. He did not argue with the possibility of transformation. He accepted it, went to the place where it might occur, and waited. This quiet waiting reflects a quality that many spiritual seekers strive for yet rarely achieve: complete openness to whatever life may reveal. Why do we dismiss such questions as childish instead of recognizing them as profound? Perhaps because they threaten our attachment to stable identities. The boy's experience reveals how deeply belief shapes reality. What was meant as discipline became an existential inquiry. What was spoken as metaphor became a doorway into awareness. His vigil by the ocean symbolizes the spiritual journey itself, standing at the edge of what we know, waiting without certainty for transformation to arrive. Tonight, as you consider change in your own life, can you recover a little of that childlike openness? What would it mean to allow yourself to become something unfamiliar, something beyond your current self-image? The Buddha taught that what truly matters is how deeply we live, how sincerely we love, and how gracefully we learn to let go. The boy who wondered if he had become a flounder was already touching the core of spiritual inquiry, the realization that identity is fluid, and that what we are is far more mysterious than we imagine. And now, we turn to another teaching. A story about hesitation and commitment, about the subtle difference between trying and truly doing. In the quiet courtyard of a mountain monastery, where pine trees whispered and bells echoed softly, a Zen master met with a devoted student. The student's eyes showed sincerity, yet beneath his dedication lay a quiet reluctance. Sensing this, the master offered gentle guidance. "Sit in meditation 3 times each day," he said. "Morning, afternoon, and evening. Let repetition deepen your understanding." The student nodded respectfully. After a pause, he replied, "Yes, master. I will try." The master turned, and a book slipped from beneath his arm. As it fell to the ground, he bent to pick it up, but missed it by a small distance. Again he reached, and again his hand failed to grasp it. The student watched, confused. Finally, he stepped forward and picked up the book easily. Suddenly, the master struck it from his hands. "I did not ask you to pick it up," he said. "I asked you to try." In that moment, the difference between hesitation and commitment became clear. To try is to leave a door open for retreat. To do is to step fully into action. The Buddha taught that effort is essential on the path, but true effort is not strained. It arises naturally when intention and action become one. Tonight, as you listen to these stories, you may notice how often the mind says, "I will try." And perhaps, in the quiet space between breaths, you may sense another possibility, the simple, gentle power of wholehearted presence. And so the journey continues, moving ever deeper into silence, where wisdom speaks not through force, but through stillness, and where the path unfolds one quiet moment at a time. The Master's subtle way of teaching reveals another quiet truth. Sometimes the most transformative guidance does not arrive wrapped in gentleness, but in moments that shake us awake from our hidden habits. When the Prime Minister felt his dignity suddenly wounded, a doorway opened inside his awareness. For an instant, he saw patterns that had been shaping his reactions long before he noticed them. In Zen practice, we slowly learn what might be called clarity of self. We do not attempt to destroy the ego, for such a thing would be neither possible nor wise. Instead, we learn to see it more lightly, to recognize its voice without becoming lost in its stories. Tonight, when you feel defensiveness, irritation, or quiet pride arise in your heart, can you remember the Prime Minister's awakening? Can you see these reactions not as failures, but as gentle invitations to deeper understanding? As the Buddha taught, we lose only what we cling to. The ego is simply another form of clinging, a collection of stories about who we believe ourselves to be. When we loosen our grip on these stories, we begin to taste a freedom that lies beyond the walls of self-importance. And so, we move gently onward toward a story about the unseen burdens we carry through our lives. This is the story of the empty backpack. In the quiet garden of a monastery, where morning dew rested softly upon winding paths, a young seeker approached his teacher with a heavy heart. His eyes reflected both longing and confusion as he bowed. "Master," he said softly, "I wish to understand my path more clearly. Why do I feel as if I am always carrying my past with me? Why does it follow me wherever I go?" The teacher looked at him with eyes filled with quiet compassion, then gestured toward a labyrinth of delicate silk panels shimmering in the light. "Walk into the maze," the teacher said, lifting a worn leather backpack. "Carry this with you. It will help you remain attentive. But be mindful, it is very heavy." The young man accepted the pack with curiosity. Yet the moment it settled on his shoulders, he felt an astonishing weight pressing him forward. With effort, he stepped into the maze. Inside, he met wall after wall. Through the translucent silk, he could see other seekers moving through their own paths like distant shadows. No matter which direction he chose, his way seemed blocked. Tired and discouraged, he sat down. "Others seem far ahead," he thought. "Should I bend the rules and slip beneath the silk?" After a long struggle within himself, he chose honesty instead. When he stood again with renewed resolve, an opening appeared before him. He moved forward until another wall stopped him once more. This time, effort brought no reward. The weight of the backpack cut deeply into his shoulders. What could be so heavy, yet feel so soft, he wondered. He removed the pack and looked inside. It was completely empty. Yet when he lifted it again, the weight remained. As he placed it back on his shoulders, a quiet voice arose within him. "Look inward. The weight is not in the bag. It is within you." Suddenly, memories poured into his awareness. Old wounds, forgotten humiliations, resentments carried for years. With each memory, the backpack grew heavier. Then understanding dawned. "I am the weight," he whispered. "I am the one who carries what troubles me." In that moment, he began to forgive. "I release you," he said softly, to people he had never fully let go. The backpack began to lighten. New pathways opened before him. Sunlight warmed his face, and memories of kindness and love returned. With each act of forgiveness, the weight diminished further, until the pack felt almost weightless. At last, surrounded by the silent silk walls, he sat in stillness. "I am both the path and the traveler," he realized. "I was never imprisoned by others. I was imprisoned by my own holding." As these words settled in his heart, his feet began to lift from the earth. He rose above the maze, seeing how others still wandered beneath the weight of unseen burdens. With a single thought, he found himself beside his teacher outside the labyrinth. "Master," he said quietly, "I discovered that my darkness created my heaviness, and my letting go allowed me to rise." The teacher smiled gently and said nothing more, walking away in silence. The Buddha reminds us, holding on to anger is like grasping a burning coal with the intention of throwing it at another. You are the one who is burned. This story reveals a simple yet profound truth. We often create our own burdens. Our past does not imprison us. Our relationship to it does. The young seeker learned that suffering did not come from what others had done, but from his refusal to release those experiences. The empty backpack symbolizes the unseen weight of unhealed emotions that many of us carry quietly through life. Why do we cling so tightly to pain? Sometimes because we build our identity around it. Sometimes because familiarity feels safer than freedom. Sometimes because we misunderstand forgiveness, believing it excuses harm rather than liberating the heart. In everyday life, these burdens appear in subtle ways. A careless word spoken long ago still echoes in your mind. A forgotten injustice still shapes your reactions. Each memory becomes another invisible stone in your pack. As one teacher said, forgiveness is the act of releasing the hope that the past could have been different. We cannot change what happened, but we can change how we carry it. The image of floating above the maze reminds us of the lightness that arises when we choose freedom over familiarity and growth over grievance. Tonight, as you prepare to rest, what unseen weight might you still be holding? Is it time to lay it down gently? The Buddha taught, you, as much as anyone in the universe, deserve your own compassion. The journey toward freedom begins with tenderness toward oneself and the courage to travel lightly through life's inevitable challenges. Now we turn quietly toward another story, a story about identity dissolving and the deep questioning that can lead to sudden awakening. This is the story called, Whose Child Are You? In the village of Hina lived a woman named Masa, whose life had been shaped by loss and guided by a fierce devotion to understanding. After her husband's passing, she could have chosen a life of ordinary comfort or practical survival. Instead, she turned inward, toward the path of awakening. Masa became a devoted student of Zen under the guidance of Master Datsu. Her practice was not casual. She approached it with the intensity of someone who knew that true awakening demands complete sincerity. Day after day, she worked with her koan, allowing it to penetrate every corner of her awareness until it became more real than her own thoughts. As her practice deepened, a great questioning arose within her, not doubt of ideas, but a profound inquiry into the nature of self, identity, and existence itself. So absorbed did she become that ordinary concerns began to fade. There were days when she forgot even to cook, sitting in silence while questions burned quietly in her heart. One afternoon, when her son returned home expecting to find his mother in her familiar role, she looked at him with eyes that seemed to see beyond form. "Whose child are you?" she asked gently. Startled, the boy replied, "Mother, what are you saying?" Masa smiled faintly, as though something essential had been confirmed, and returned to her meditation. 4 days, she repeated the same question. Each time, her son answered with confusion. Each time, she responded only with quiet satisfaction. Then, like lightning across a dark sky, awakening came. In a single moment, all questioning dissolved into clarity. The Buddha taught, all that we are arises from what we have thought. The mind shapes the world we inhabit. Masa's question was not directed at social identity, but at the deeper mystery of existence. Who are we beyond roles, names, and relationships? Her practice had brought her to a place where familiar identities began to soften. Mother and child, self and other, appeared not as fixed realities, but as passing forms within awareness. This was not a rejection of love, but a widening of it. Zen teaches that suffering often arises from clinging to fixed ideas of who we are. When these ideas are questioned deeply enough, we glimpse the vast awareness that precedes them. The great questioning that Masa cultivated was not cynicism, but radical openness. Her total dedication created the conditions for transformation. Half-hearted inquiry brings only partial insight. Awakening often arrives not gradually, but suddenly, when all questions fall away. We see similar patterns in many forms of discovery, in science, in art, in love. When our assumptions are challenged, confusion often arises. Yet confusion may be the threshold of truth. Masa's simple response, "All right," suggests that uncertainty itself can be a doorway. This story reminds us that social identities are not our deepest nature. We are more than roles and labels. Zen practice teaches us to move fluidly through roles without being trapped by them. When Masa asked, "Whose child are you?" she was pointing toward the mystery that lies beneath all answers. True transformation often requires courage, the courage to question everything we believe about ourselves. Tonight, as you rest quietly with your own thoughts, can you gently ask, "Who am I beyond my name, my history, my roles, my plans?" The Buddha taught that in the end, three things matter: how deeply we have lived, how sincerely we have loved, and how gracefully we have learned to let go. Through questioning identity, we discover a nature beyond all roles, not separate from love, but the very ground from which love arises. And so, we move softly toward another story, a story about humility and the wisdom that emerges from simplicity. This is the tale of a father's insight and a farmer's quiet teaching. In a wealthy household where learning was treasured, a father spared no effort to provide his son with the finest spiritual education. The young man studied with famous masters, practiced advanced techniques, memorized sacred texts, and debated profound ideas. His knowledge became vast, his speech impressive. Yet beneath his brilliance, the father sensed a subtle pride. And so, he sent his son to visit a simple farmer. When the young man arrived, the farmer gave him only one instruction: bow. The young man bowed politely. "Deeper," said the farmer. Again and again, the young man bowed lower, until finally he lay flat upon the earth. Only then did the farmer smile. "Now you may go," he said. The Buddha taught that humility precedes true honor. And so the journey continues, gently unfolding, like breath in the quiet night, inviting the mind to soften and the heart to rest. Some monks tried to gently guide the animal away, yet their efforts rarely succeeded. The cat seemed to possess an uncanny sense of timing, appearing at precisely those moments when silence was most needed and distraction most disruptive. Eventually, the master who guided the community realized that patience alone would not resolve the situation. Rather than allowing the evening meditation to be repeatedly disturbed, he offered a simple instruction. Before each practice, the monks were to carefully hold the cat and secure it in a quiet corner of the hall, where it could no longer interfere with the stillness. The solution worked. The cat remained present, yet the minds of the monks could finally rest without interruption. Days passed, then years, and the rhythm of meditation flowed smoothly each evening. Gradually, this practical arrangement became accepted as something natural, almost unquestionable. When the old master eventually passed away, his students continued every custom he had established, including the practice of tying the cat. No one paused to ask whether the reason still existed. The ritual had become part of the monastery's identity. When the original cat died, the monks felt a quiet urgency. Convinced that meditation could not proceed without a bound cat, they searched for another animal to replace it. When they found one, the tradition continued without interruption. Generations of monks came and went. Each learned from the previous generation that tying a cat was an essential element of spiritual practice. No one questioned the origin of this custom. It had simply become the way things are done. Centuries later, scholars wrote elaborate texts explaining the sacred meaning of restraining the cat. They described it as a symbol of disciplining the restless mind, a mystical act necessary for creating the right atmosphere of contemplation. The Buddha once taught that we should not accept ideas simply because they are old or widely repeated. This story quietly reveals how easily practical solutions can transform into empty rituals when their original purpose is forgotten. Why do we continue certain practices long after their usefulness has faded? Simply because they feel familiar. Zen reminds us to understand the spirit behind forms, rather than clinging blindly to inherited customs. The master's decision was never mystical. It was merely a practical response to a specific problem. Yet over time, that response was ritualized, then sanctified, then analyzed as if it contained hidden spiritual depth. Look gently at your own life. How many habits, rules, or traditions do you follow not because they serve you now, but because they have always been there? The monastery's cat represents the many forms we preserve out of habit rather than wisdom. What begins as skillful means can slowly harden into meaningless ceremony. Zen teaches us to distinguish between the finger pointing at the moon and the moon itself. The cat was never the essence. Silence was the essence. Yet later generations lost sight of this truth. The Buddha compared his teachings to a raft, useful for crossing the river, but not meant to be carried forever. When we turn temporary rafts into permanent monuments, we confuse the means with the destination. Tonight, as you reflect on the patterns in your life, can you sense which forms still serve their purpose and which have become empty repetition? Can you honor the spirit of your practices while remaining flexible in their expression? The scholars who praised the cat did not intend to mislead. They believed they were preserving wisdom, yet their explanations rested on foundations they no longer understood. As you settle into stillness, remember the original cat and the simple problem it solved. May you learn to see clearly which traditions nourish life and which quietly obscure it. True maturity lies not in preserving forms, but in continually rediscovering their meaning. And now, we turn softly toward another story. A story about the fragile boundary between heaven and hell within the human heart. This is the tale of a warrior and the gates. In feudal Japan, a hardened samurai named Nobushi sought out the Zen master Hakuin. His armor bore the marks of countless battles, and his eyes carried the fatigue of a life shaped by conflict. Approaching the master's humble dwelling, he bowed with rigid formality. "Master," he said, "I have faced death many times in service to my Lord. Tell me honestly, is there truly a heaven and a hell awaiting us after death?" Hakuin looked at him quietly. "Who are you to ask such a question?" he replied. "I am a samurai," the warrior answered with pride. "I have never fled from battle." The master's expression suddenly hardened. "A soldier like you?" he said with faint contempt. "What ruler would entrust his safety to someone so crude? Your face resembles that of a beggar, not a guardian of honor." The words struck the warrior like blows. His face burned with anger, and his hand moved instinctively toward his sword. "So you carry a blade?" Hakuin continued calmly. "I doubt it is sharp enough to cut anything of value." The samurai's fury erupted. His sword began to slide from its sheath, steel catching the afternoon light. In that instant, his world narrowed to rage. Then Hakuin spoke softly. "Here, the gates of hell open." The words pierced the warrior's heart. In a single moment he saw himself clearly, consumed by anger, ready to kill over wounded pride. His hand froze. Slowly, he returned the sword to its sheath and bowed deeply before the master. His rage transformed into gratitude. "Here," Hakuin said gently, "the gates of heaven open." The Buddha taught that hatred cannot be ended by hatred, but only by understanding. This story reveals a quiet truth. Heaven and hell are not distant realms, but states of mind we enter moment by moment. Why do we so easily find ourselves at the gates of suffering? Zen speaks of the three poisons: greed, anger, and confusion. When the warrior's pride was wounded, anger arose instantly, turning a peaceful encounter into a storm of pain. The deeper lesson is simple. We carry within us the seeds of both worlds. Heaven and hell are not destinations after death. They are experiences we create while alive. Every moment offers a choice between reactivity and awareness, between contraction and clarity. Notice how often similar transformations occur in your own day. A harsh message arrives, and calm turns into tension. A careless word is spoken, and openness closes into defensiveness. Zen practice teaches us to recognize the instant before we cross the threshold. Like the warrior pausing with his sword, we learn to see the moment when we are about to enter suffering. That recognition itself becomes the key to freedom. When we are lost in reaction, we reject the present moment. We choose our thoughts over reality. Hakuin's sharp words were not cruelty, but compassion in disguise. By awakening the warrior's anger, he revealed the truth that could not be taught through gentleness alone. What situations carry you instantly towards suffering? Feeling misunderstood, unappreciated, or threatened? Each moment offers the same choice. Will you draw your sword, or recognize the teaching hidden within the experience? Tonight, as irritation or restlessness arises in your mind, can you remember this story? Can you pause at the threshold and choose awareness instead of reaction? The Buddha taught that what we think, we become. In every moment, we open either the gates of suffering or the gates of peace. And now, as our journey gently comes to rest, notice how the calm you feel is not something you had to create. It was always here, waiting beneath the noise of thought. The silence you touch through these stories does not belong only to ancient monks or distant temples. It lives quietly within your own awareness. The Buddha said that truth cannot remain hidden forever. The clarity you feel tonight is not a temporary gift, but a reflection of your own nature revealed when the mind becomes still. Through each story, you have encountered the same quiet understanding, that struggle softens when we stop resisting what is. That freedom arises when we release the need to control. And that peace emerges naturally when we observe life without clinging. Even when thoughts return tomorrow, even when stress seeks your attention again, these insights will remain quietly rooted within you, supporting you in moments you may not even notice. As you prepare for sleep, feel how naturally your breath deepens, how gently your body relaxes, how softly your mind settles into stillness. These stories remind us that wisdom is not distant or complicated. It appears in the quiet moments when we simply pause and listen. Tonight, you have touched that quiet. Carry this calm with you into tomorrow, not as something to hold tightly, but as something that flows naturally within you. May this inner silence become your companion through every joy and challenge ahead. Rest peacefully. And thank you for walking this gentle path with the silent monk.